What is going on, guys? Adam Katz for BrowningDirect.com, the dog trainer marketing agency. I thought that since today is December 30th, the day before New Year's Eve, I would mix it up a little bit. I had this long list of different video subjects I was going to cover, different topics, and decided to set all that aside because as we're going into the new year, I thought I would share a little story with you about how I became a professional dog trainer. It's funny. I had some people comment in the dog trainer marketing group, which is my group on Facebook, which if you're not a member, we've got over 3,000 professional dog training business owners swapping secret strategies, tactics, and tips on how to grow their dog training business. It is free to join. But a couple of people mentioned that they didn't realize that despite me being the guy who runs Google ads for well over 50 to 60 different dog training businesses at any given time, I was also a dog trainer, a professional dog trainer. Not only that, I owned 3 different dog training businesses, and I had the #1 category killer dog training subject matter subscription membership website. It's a difficult thing to say when you haven't said it in so many years. But that website was at one time ranked in the #1 organic position on Google, on Yahoo, and the MSN network all at the same time. That website ended up making us over $6 million. That was separate from the 3 dog training businesses that I owned. But the question or the story I'd rather tell you today is about how I became a professional dog trainer. It started with this book. This is the actual copy of the book that I had when I was a kid. I'm 51 years old now, and my parents got this book when I was, I don't know, probably like 3 or 4 years old. And throughout my toddler years, up through my preteen years, even through my teenage years, basically up until I left to college, I would probably once a year, I would read through this entire book. And it's a great book. It's got all kinds of like history and pictures of dogs, like the way dogs were used throughout history, and also specifically the 50s and the 60s. But each page had a really great illustration of a different dog breed. And I would read through this as a kid, fantasizing about which dogs I could maybe own at some point later in life. Like which dogs would I want? Which dogs would I not want? What if I was living in this environment? And, it's just an amazing book. You can see the jacket here is all torn and tattered, but I absolutely was enthralled with this book and all the different breeds. And we had a Dalmatian when I was a kid, and then we moved into another house that was in a new development. They hadn't built walls yet. And my parents, it was the 70s, people didn't know better. And so they didn't want to have the dog in the house because it was a new house. So they had a dog house in the back, and they chained the dog up to the dog house. And the dog was just miserable. And at least to my parents' credit, after a couple of weeks, they realized, not knowing, what to do with the dog, that they ended up finding an elderly woman who wanted to adopt the dog, and they gave the dog to her. And it crushed me as a kid because I loved the dog, And so from that moment on, I had dreamed about getting another dog. And so finally, a little bit later in my teenage years, my father said, all right, you pick the breed, and if we agree on it, we'll let you have the dog. And so that led me back to this book again. And for our living environments and our family and everything, I ended up picking the Shetland sheepdog. And we got a little Sheltie, and had all kinds of behavior problems. I mean, we lived near an airport. The planes were flying by, and the dog would run around the backyard and try and herd the planes, and burned a trail in our backyard from where he was, running around. And the dog would bark all the time, and the dog was a major nuisance. And it crushed me, and it crushed my dreams, because here I'd been thinking about all these amazing dogs. And, it was funny because I remember when we built that house, we went to a place to get wallpaper, which is something we did back in the 70s and the early 80s. And I remember my mom saying, okay, you could pick out, I don't know, probably about 7 or 8 years old. And my mom says you can pick out the wallpaper for your room. And one of the styles of the wallpaper was like pencil drawings of dogs, like the dog head profile, right? And I thought, oh, this is great. I loved, this is the one for me. And it was kind of like a tan background with like black ink or pencil sketch, design to it, but all these different breeds. And this is what I want for my room. And I remember my mom sitting there going, you know, that might not age too well. Maybe we should get the orange plaid design instead, which is what we did, which is so funny because now nobody wants an orange plaid wallpaper in their house or their bedroom. So fast forward to when we had that Sheltie. The dog was just kind of a nuisance. It wasn't a terrible dog, but was kind of a nuisance. And back then, this was, I don't know, probably the early to mid 80s. And it was really before the entire dog training industry really took off. So the idea of hiring a private one-on-one dog trainer wasn't something at the top of mind. It just wasn't, there wasn't an awareness in the market, or for that matter, anybody even really offering that service. There were maybe a few people, Matthew Margolis, just one comes to mind. But generally speaking, the way that you would do it is you would go to a local park, and the park and rec center would have somebody running group classes, right? And so in our city, it was this old German guy who, it turns out, had a Schutzen club. Later, we became good friends and went to a Schutzen club quite a bit. But actually, now I think about it, it may have been another German guy. But regardless, we'd go to the park and, he'd march everybody around, and nobody's dog got trained. I mean, it was the whole, sit, 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 sit kind of thing. And then, the dog would immediately get up. And it didn't help solve any problems. It didn't really make any fundamental difference in our lives. Fast forward several years, I'm in college. I'm at the University of California at Berkeley. I'd had a few jobs working in different advertising agencies and marketing firms, writing ads and stuff, and had always been attracted to marketing and advertising. But my experience working in an advertising agency was that it was an environment I did not want to be in, and predominantly because you could do everything right. You can come up with this beautiful ad campaign, and then the owner of the business that was employing the ad agency, he would walk in, and maybe his daughter would look at the campaign and say, I don't like that color. Can we change the headline? As somebody who didn't know anything about marketing or copywriting or advertising was suddenly killing the response. And what are you going to do? It's their money. So I knew, like, I didn't like that. I didn't want to be in an office environment where the fluorescent lights were burning off my vitamins. And so I'm at UC Berkeley at this point, and I had a friend of mine. Her name was Sarah, and she was a grad student, and she was married to this guy named Alon. And she invited myself and a number of other people over to her house to be in a study group. We're studying for something. And so I show up at her house, and they lived in this really cool, like, wood A-frame house. And we go in there and we sit down and everything. And I look over, and her husband comes in, and he's got this giant Rottweiler. I don't think I'd ever even seen a Rottweiler before, not up close. This giant Rottweiler named Bear. And he's got this giant striped pit bull mix that was like a pit bull lab mix that was slightly smaller than Bear, named Brutus. This dog was just both of them were just muscles. And he goes, place. And these dogs run over to a pillow and they plop themselves down. It says down. And they go down and they stay down. And these dogs were like statues. And every time somebody would get up to walk into the kitchen to get a glass of water or go to the bathroom, these dogs they were just tracking everyone as they walked by. And I'd never seen anything like this. You grow up watching Lassie or TV shows where there's dogs, but it's a totally different thing when you see a dog like that in real life. And I thought two things. I thought, holy crap, this is amazing. And the second thing I thought was, wow, these dogs are so well trained. Nobody's breaking into their house. So I started talking to Sarah because her husband was doing his own thing. He had a friend over, and he was older than us, and I didn't want to bother him. So I said, what does your husband do? And she says, it's crazy, Adam. He's got this little dog training business, and he trains people's dogs. And so this was probably 1992, still kind of a little bit before the whole dog training as a career thing took off. I'd never even heard of that. And I said to her, I remember saying, can somebody really make a living doing that? I mean, like, how do you pay your bills? And she says, yeah, he not only does he make a living, but he makes a really good living. I was blown away. I said, what? Tell me more. I got to know more. She says, again, remember, this was 1992. She says, he makes at least $1,000 a dog, and he's got so many people that he's turning people away. How many dogs can you train in a month? I don't know, at least 11 or 12 dogs, at least that many. And does he have a shop? No, this was Northern California, right? So the weather was reasonably good. She says, no, he's got a little Nissan hardbody truck. He basically runs the business out of the back of his truck. He meets people at the local park. He doesn't have to pay to use the park. And these people meet him there, and he trains them, and he makes $1,000 a dog. And the wheels in my brain started turning, and I started thinking about this. I'm like, that's crazy. So he can make $1,000 a dog. He's probably getting paid in cash, because this guy, I don't think he was even legal yet. I don't even think he had legal status. There's obviously demand for this, because he's got so many people he's turning people away, and he's making really, really good money doing it. And not only that, but he gets to work outside, so he doesn't have to be cooped up in an office somewhere. And, he has virtually no overhead. It was amazing. So I knew right away this is what I wanted to do, right? I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it for the rest of my life, but I knew that this was one of those skills, and there was at least enough demand for it that even if I went off and decided to become a lawyer or do something else with my life, I could always fall back on that. It was something that if I could learn how to do that, I knew if I had a truck and a leash, have leash will travel, that kind of thing, that I would always be able to support myself. So I called Sarah up, and I said, Sarah, do you think your husband would be willing to mentor me and teach me how to be a professional dog trainer? And she said, yeah, I'll run it by him, but I don't think he's really that interested. So I said, okay. So a couple months went by, and I kept calling and kept calling. I said, listen, I can't stop thinking about this. I gotta learn more, because there wasn't anybody else in the area that was doing it the way that he was doing it. And for that matter, getting the results. And so they kept kind of blowing me off. And somehow I found out that he wanted to produce a VHS video, back when everybody used VHS videos. He wanted to create a dog training video and sell it, and sell it on TV, as an infomercial, right? But he was Israeli. He didn't really speak very good English, and he had no background in marketing. Guess who had a background in marketing and advertising? This guy. So, I said, how about this? How about, you teach me how to train dogs, and I'll help you produce this video, anything that you need, from the filming to the packaging to the whatever. And, we'll do a little trade. And they said, well, let me think about it. A couple months later, I'm on a road trip up the Pacific Northwest. I went to Portland and Seattle and Eugene, and I get this I think I had a pager at the time. I'm really dating myself. This was before cell phones. And I found I got a page, and I found a phone booth. These are these, big glass cages you'd go in and put a quarter in. And so I called, and it was Sarah. And Sarah says to me, hey, you know what? It's your lucky day. My husband decided that he wants to work with you. And I was like, wow, I was overjoyed. I really had no direction in my life at that point. And this was the coolest thing I'd ever heard of. So I got back from my trip. Long story short, ended up apprenticing with him for about a year. And to give you some backstory on him, he was very much a Cesar Millan type of personality. I mean, very similar training style, very similar type of personality. He just kind of had this magnetic personality, and people were very much drawn to him, which I'm sure helped with his success. So I would get, during the day, I was going to college, so I'd take whatever class or a couple of classes I was taking during the day, and then I'd head over to meet him at the park so that I can basically shadow him while he worked with his clients. And over the course of a year, we became very good friends. And he started letting me work with some of his clients, and I got a dog myself. I got a little pit bull and was working my own dog and working along him. And then in the evening, we'd head back over to his house and we'd work on the marketing stuff and also talk dogs. And so as I was coming up upon my graduation from UC Berkeley, one of the things I enjoyed doing was in his office, he had this big library of dog training books, just all kinds of books. And he'd never let me take any books home, but he'd say, you can read them here. Like, you spend as much time as you want, stay in my office. You can spend hours if you want reading my books. But he says, anytime I lend a book to somebody, what happens is I forget who I lent the book to, and then I never get the book back, which I could relate. And so after apprenticing with him for about a year, I felt like I had about 80% of what I needed. And he specialized in aggression, and I got bit occasionally, and that still really kind of freaked me out. I didn't want to be in a position where when I started my own dog training company and I had, a Rottweiler like bear come up the leash at me, like I still didn't quite feel like I had 100% of what I needed. I felt like there was something he was kind of holding back. And I don't know if that was intentional or if it was just a language barrier issue or just that he was a really good trainer but didn't know how to teach other people to be a professional trainer. I don't know what it was, but maybe it was me. I didn't feel like I had 100% of it. So one of the books that he had on a shelf was written by a gentleman named Tom Rose. And in the back of the book, Tom mentioned that he had a school for dog trainers. And I felt like, I needed a little bit more context. I needed to work with other trainers to really kind of help further my education. And so I asked Alon, I said, who is this Tom Rose guy, and is he any good? And Alon shook his head. He said, yeah, this guy's really good. If you're going to learn from any of these people who wrote these books that I've got, Tom Rose he's the real deal. So I was like, great. So I called Tom Rose up, and his school at the time I think was like, boy, I don't remember. It might have been like between $3,000 to $6,000. And ended up driving from Berkeley after I graduated. I drove from Berkeley to High Ridge, Missouri, and went through one of Tom Rose's programs. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't even graduate. I think I spent 2.5 months there. All I was interested in was really learning how to put a muzzle on a dog and be safe working with aggressive dogs. Well, Tom Rose's program really focused a lot on sport dog training and police dog training and drug detection. So I got exposed to a lot of that too. And that was excellent. In fact, if you're going to work with pet dogs and help people stop aggression issues with their dogs, I'd highly recommend you learn how to do protection dog training as well, not with the intent of offering protection dog training as a service, because the bread and butter in this industry is really offering obedience and behavior modification. But once you learn how to work a dog in protection, it will give you tremendous insight into understanding the drives and the nerves and what goes into a dog's mind to make him bite in a pet context. So that those skills that you learn working protection dogs will translate over into working pet dogs. So I got to a point after 2.5 months, absolutely hated Missouri. I have no problem with Tom Rose. Tom's a great guy. I have nothing bad to say about him. But I kind of felt like I had what I needed. And I didn't feel like, from a marketing and advertising perspective, I didn't feel like anybody would give two shits about whether or not I had a certificate from the Tom Rose School of Professional Dog Trainers. Nobody knew who Tom Rose was. I'd been working with Alon as an assistant to a professional dog trainer for over a year, and I didn't even really know who he was. So I didn't have any great faith that having the certificate was going to help me sign clients. I knew that marketing and advertising and writing copy and being able to sell and all these traits that come in handy for running any business is what would help me run my own professional dog training business. So once I kind of got to that point where I felt like, okay, I have a strategy for working with aggressive dogs and can keep myself relatively safe, I was good to go. So I got in my little Mitsubishi Toyota pickup truck and I drove back from St. Louis, Missouri to California. My plan was to spend a few weeks with my family and then head up back to Northern California across the bay to Marin County. Now, one of the marketing companies that I worked for, the fellow's wife, I ended up working for her as well. She was a real estate broker in Marin County. For those of you who don't know Marin County, Marin is one of the wealthiest counties in America. And she was selling $1 million homes. There's just a lot of money in Marin County, a lot of money. And I thought, well, I didn't want to set up shop in Berkeley and Oakland across the bay and compete with my former mentor. Marin County seems like the perfect place. Well, as I'm driving back to California, my grandmother, rest in peace, passes away, and I ended up spending more time in Southern California than I had originally planned, maybe 5 or 6 weeks. And during that point in time, friends of the family are coming by and finding out that I'm a professional dog trainer. And they say, these people were saying basically, you know, before you go up to Northern California, can you help me train my dog? Okay. And people were like effortlessly just throwing money at me. I mean, it was like, it was too good. I couldn't believe it. It was too good to be true without even any advertising or marketing or anything. So I decided to set up my first of what would later be 3 dog training businesses in Southern California. And that started me on my way, on my path to, well, that was the beginning of my career as a professional dog trainer and professional dog training business owner. I'm going to continue this because I want to take you through where that led me, because I think it's kind of interesting, and that leads into, you know, when I started dogproblems.com, and we ended up making $6 million from that website, and then also all the information products that I created, the VHSs and the DVDs and the audio lectures and all that kind of stuff. It was an amazing adventure. So I'll probably share that with you maybe tomorrow in the next video in this series on how I became a professional dog trainer. Take care, guys.